have today an honor. We are very pleased to welcome our honorable guest. On my right-hand side, we have the editor-in-chief of the Liberte magazine, a journalist and political scientist, political developments commentator, Mr. Leszek Jażdżewski. And on my far right-hand side, we have Dr. Yaron Brook, the executive director of the Ayn Rand Institute, which is spreading Ayn Rand's word and works and the philosophy of objectivism across the globe. And Dr. Brook is the author of many books, including the likes of his newest book entitled Free Market Revolution. He is also a member of Mount Tolerance Society. And please give Dr. Brook very warm welcome. And today's debate will have two parts. The first part will be the questions I will ask to our honorable guests, which will take about an hour. Every of our guests will have about 5 minutes to answer each of the questions. And then after about an hour, we will move on to the second part of our debate, which will be the questions from you, the questions from the audience. So if you would like to ask some questions to one of our guests, please raise your hand, introduce yourself, and try to make your question as short as possible, so that the others will have some time for their question as well. I know that it sounds a bit of altruistic, but sorry for that. And of course, to point out directly who are you asked about. Okay? So our today's topic is, to say, a bit controversial. Dr. Brook said that as at the first time he saw the topic, he told me that it shouldn't be put this way. But before we go to the whole topic, I would like to start our debate with defining the terms. I would like to ask you, what is capitalism? How do you define capitalism? How do you understand this term? And first, I would like to hear the answer from Mr. Leszek.
Well, we really start with very simple questions, and it's early in the afternoon. But well, I'm just Dr. Brooks is very well known. Perhaps not all of you know what I am doing here. I'm very pleased, by the way, and honored. Thank you for the chance. I wouldn't go into giving you the big definitions, but what I think is important about capitalism is that, and especially if you bring the European and American perspectives, is that capitalism is a dynamic system, and it functions in the social context, which is constantly changing. And when you see the capitalism of the, let's say, early 19th or even late 19th century, and compare it to the FDR's, Franklin Delano Roosevelt's capitalism, and then the Reagan's, and then the, well, who knows whose capitalism is today, in the world or in the United States or in any particular country in Europe, you see that the basic, well, let's say the basic grounds, the respect for, or even the almost even more than respect, is like the very basic principle of capitalism, which was the driving force of its success, the private property, and is a fundament of existence of capitalism as such, as in opposition to the system that, from what I see, most of you fortunately didn't experience yourself being the socialism which you had here. So with despite the respect for private property, the tax system, the scale of the state intervention was very different and depends on many factors. And still, what I think is our topic is here to debate capitalism and inequality. And well, I think that it's very fair that libertarians or liberals, as myself, debate such things, because I very strongly believe that leaving some issues to the left or to conservative is, such as topic of inequality or the red color, which I personally quite like, is a mistake. So that's why we, for example, in Liberte, we did an issue on the liberal social policy, which seems like a contradiction in itself, but the reality where capitalism exists, starting from the autocratic or, well, basically autocratic states of, well, monarchies and the states where very few people had a right to vote, to the present-day democracies where the capitalism functions in the context of global system, but still the national states or the political entities which define our behavior as citizens, means that there are certain challenges to the very idea that to the very basic principles of capitalism, and ignoring things like Piketty book from or all the stuff that perhaps most of you, I suppose, there are not that many people from Krytyka Polityczna here, or I won't be surprised, but which is the left, like a dissent magazine here, and so so perhaps most of you rather go for reading like the Fountainhead or than reading the Piketty, which is fair enough, but they are on the winning side, both here in Poland and Europe, and to understand why people are after the Reagan and Thatcher revolution, which were the defining moments for us here in this country in the 1990s, where our economic and political thinking was being defined. Well, that's a good thing to debate. So perhaps I kind of avoided your question, but I think we have more capable people here to speak on the, well, it's not a classroom anyway, and so I will stop here and wait for my another 5 minutes. Next question. Thank you.
Thanks. Did this go off? This went off. Which button? There we go. Okay.
That works. Whoa. First, let me thank my opponent here, my debating partner, I guess, for agreeing to debate, particularly in English. I know it's difficult to debate in one's second language, so I appreciate your willingness to do this. Capitalism is the system of private property. It's a system in which, ideally, all property is privately owned. It really is the system in which there is a separation between the government and the economy, which the government has no role in the economy. So that is what that is what capitalism is. And this was my kind of objection to the title, because the title had something about European capitalism, and there's very little capitalism in the world today. All of us lived in mixed economies with elements of capitalism. This just goes off by itself.
Maybe the battery is.
Yeah, I don't know that we need this. Maybe for the recording, but you guys can hear me?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. The sound is echoey anyway. We live in mixed economies. We live in economies that have elements of capitalism. They have elements of private property. There's no pure private property. In the United States, I like to tell people that we're all renting our homes from the government. And as an example of that, just try not paying your property taxes. And what happens is the real owner of the property comes and takes it back from you. That's fine. We don't need it. So we live in a situation where there's some protection of property rights. It's very limited, and where the government is involved in many of our decisions, in many of our economic decisions. So we live in this complex world in which the state, I think, dominates, and that is true in the U.S. as it is true in Europe. It's more true in Europe than in the United States. The state here is bigger and more engaged in the economic affairs of individuals in Europe than it is in America. But even in America, we see this, and we see it growing. And this is the thing about the Reagan and Thatcher revolutions, and particularly the Reagan one, is that it wasn't a revolution. There was nothing revolutionary about what Reagan did. I mean, he spoke, he talked the talk, but he never walked the walk, to use an American expression. He never executed on what he said. So under Reagan, government spending doubled in the United States. Under Reagan, regulations increased. Under Reagan, every aspect of government grew, except one, which is taxes. He lowered the taxation rates. That's good. I'm all for lowering taxes. But that's not a substantial movement towards capitalism. Thatcher had a deeper impact on Europe and on the UK in particular than Reagan did. In that sense, she was much more of a revolutionary than Reagan was. But neither one of them changed the dynamics of the direction of the world in a fundamental sense. And that's why I think ultimately, long-term, they failed. That's why I think the left is winning, because the debate has never really shifted. The debate about why capitalism is moral or not moral, what are the ethical arguments for or against capitalism, I think is the fundamental debate. And most defenders of capitalism won't talk about it. This is why I think Piketty is winning, because Piketty holds the moral high ground, or at least presents himself as holding the moral high ground, and almost nobody will challenge him. Yeah, I'm going to switch it off. Unless you can't hear. You guys can hear me, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the only challenges Piketty gets, even from the right, are challenges about his data and his theory. But nobody challenges what I think is much more fundamental to Piketty, which are his moral philosophical assumptions. And as long as that is not challenged, the left, the statist element, is going to win and continue to dominate.
So I don't know if I can hear as loud as Dr. Brook, but I hope that everyone can hear me as well.
Yes.
The real question is, can video camera hear you?
Yeah, that's the question. But anyhow, Mr. Jażdżewski, you have pointed out this parallel to Roosevelt's administration and to the 20s and to the 30s. And I would like, in this context, to ask you, gentlemen, what do you think about so-called economic crisis which started in 2007? Do you think that this is another time when the capitalism is to blame? Is it once again the fault of capitalism, that capitalism failed once again? Or maybe the situation is different? Maybe once again the government interfered too much, the government regulated the economy too much, and what we are seeing today and what we've seen during the Great Depression is not the fault of the capitalism itself, but maybe once again this is the fault of the politicians. What is your view on the subject of those economic crises?
Who do you want us to go first?
Once again, let's the voice to Mr. Jażdżewski.
Okay, that's a good thing about having a microphone, you know, who is actually about to speak, or whose time is to speak. But, well, we'll do that. So
it works if you want.
No, I know. I just say that then we know who's, you know, wanted to be a speaker at the moment. But I'm good. So yeah, that's a question that, well, the good answer will take perhaps about, it could take either 12 seconds or perhaps 2 hours.
so I'll try to stick to the 5 minutes. Honestly, I really believe in this kind of like moral talk that we have like a white and black, and you know, it's like speaking about when you speak about social issues. When you speak about social world full of our individual choices, it's usually the gray area, and only when you go to the kind of religious terms, you have 100% evil and 100% good. And that's why I'm not comfortable into telling, okay, this is to blame. For the record, capitalism never fails. Capitalism cannot fail. It's like it cannot fail, and where it functions, it's not failing like gravity is not failing. Rain is falling, but it doesn't mean when it doesn't rain. Does rain really fails? Capitalism is very closely connected to our individual choices, our very basic need of gathering things, of feeling, improving our well-being, and this is very natural. This is a very natural need. However, we had this need even before. It's called greed, right? It's called greed by those who like it, and also by those who don't like it. And capitalism is a system that uses this very basic human need and turn this this need, which was a sin for a very long time, used it for the better good. So that we have a system where we don't say that we are not altruistic. Yes, we are. When you are buying meat, right, as Adam Smith wrote, you don't really think that you're going to buy it because the butcher likes you or wants your well-being in any way. And this is the whole success story behind capitalism in the last more than 3 centuries. And so capitalism cannot fail. And in this term, and in this case, to say that the state failed would be, well, capitalism actually succeeded. The crisis, 2007 crisis, and was once again the proof that capitalism works. That you cannot cheat in a way. I mean, you can cheat, you can print money, you can have a big credits to buy stuff from China if you're America, right? America, well, Lehman Brothers can go bankrupt. America, well, for now, it seems it cannot. Maybe it will in the future, and I think it will be good if countries can also go bankrupt and be responsible. So in this case, it was the whole global system works in a way that now in Asia, basically, we produce stuff, and what we have in the Western world, I say we, even though we are kind of in between, we have money because we were earning a lot and saving stuff for these 300 centuries or less. And well, we can print money, we can have debts and buy this stuff very cheaply and have it and buy it in our supermarkets in Europe, in the United States. And the problem is that most of or more and more of the production of things moves either to technology or to the very cheap labor elsewhere. This is why capitalism works. If you ask people who are real humanitarians, who are thinking about real inequalities in the world, you say, okay, we have 300 million Chinese people who are now better off because of the opening of their country. And of course we have perhaps 20, 30, million people, or we have old Detroit. I'm from Łódź. It's sometimes called Polish Detroit. It's not true. But of course we are much better. But the problem of failing old industries is present. They didn't fail because we don't need any more cars. Simply they were cheaper to produce elsewhere. The fact that Chinese are better off now, it's not a very good consolation to people from Detroit, right? So they vote for, now they vote for people who promise them the better future, even though there will be no better future for them. Because they are they are useless, basically, for the system as such. We need this perhaps 20% of the population in California and New York, and maybe some farmers, but they've got subsidies. And really, we don't need the others, because the capitalism now, almost in the whole world, works better or worse. But these people there, they can produce things much cheaper. And I say our, but it's really American or maybe British, maybe even French, capitalism and production of of goods which are actually having a very high added value that still cannot be added but will be added in China or Thailand. So in this system, you've got this the problem that people still want to be better off, even if they don't produce anything that others want to buy. So the only way to do this is to get a credit. And the problem is that here you get incentives coming from both the state, which gives you a very cheap credit, and the dot-com bubble in 2001 was kind of like offshored in a way, or by Alan Greenspan. And that was the way to avoid the bigger crash in 2001, and then we had even a bigger crash in 2007. But that was because people wanted. I mean, because people wanted this money to buy this stuff that they can get from China, to buy this, have these mortgages for the houses, which they shouldn't have, and which was actually the Clinton's administration idea to give them, and also to create banks too big to fail. And the problem with liberals, all libertarians, is that they are connected to world of big corporations and the world of the world that is not the it has nothing in common with the liberal idea. I say liberal because we are in Europe, and liberal here still means what it meant before the left in the United States took it. And I don't feel responsible for this. And the problem of capitalism is that it's so successful that some big, political parties, big corporations are powerful enough to change the rules. So if they're going bankrupt, they change the rule, and the public now have to give them money so they don't go bankrupt. And well, perhaps we should let them fail, but we could not because we changed the rules, and now investment banks are connected with the normal banks who all have savings. We cannot let these banks go bankrupt because then we have the mass protests on the street. So this is the answer. We have capitalism as a mixed kind of world system of economy, which is highly interconnected in the world, but we still live in the world of national states, which is not really dealing well with this kind of system. And so that's why I think that this crash or this crisis that you mentioned is just going to be first of many others that we are going to face in the future.
So, the financial crisis could not have been a crisis of capitalism because there was no real capitalism before the crash. I mean, these markets were heavily regulated. So if you think about the markets that suffered during the financial crisis, the housing market, the mortgage market, and the financial markets, these are the three most regulated industries in the United States. As was really expressed, the Clinton administration increased the quotas for how many houses people should own. The mortgages were all being subsidized by Freddie and Fannie. And banks are the most regulated industry in the United States. Everything a bank does in America has to be approved and authorized by some bureaucrat, by some regulator. So there is no marketplace. And the same thing, so the financial crisis is a crisis of government. It's a crisis of government policy. Government policy caused the crisis, and government policy, I agree, we're heading towards more crises because the government has learned nothing from this current crisis. Everything they did badly before the crisis, very low interest rates, below the rate of inflation, so negative real rates of return we had from 2002 to 2004 because, as you said, Alan Greenspan didn't want a recession after 9/11, after the dot-com bubble and 9/11, so he bailed everybody out by lowering interest rates to below the rate of inflation. He caused the financial crisis in 2007. Now we got 0% interest rates, and in Europe you've got negative rates. So we're doing exactly the same thing as we did before the crisis. And then in mortgages, in the United States today, Freddie and Fannie used to have 50% of all the mortgages. Now they have 95% of all the mortgages. So everything we've doubled up on, everything we're making worse, not better. The same thing with regard to the Great Depression, if you go back to the 20s. It's not capitalism that caused the Great Depression. The Great Depression was caused by Federal Reserve policy. I mean, this is well documented. There are very few economists today who don't agree that the Federal Reserve's policies are what caused the Great Depression and made it deeper. And then it's the policies of Hoover and the policies of FDR that deepened the Great Depression, that made it a depression. Rather than having a big recession, they made it into a 20 or 15-year depression. So both these crises are government caused from beginning to end. But what we learned from them is that capitalism is evil, capitalism is bad, and therefore the consequences are more regulations, more controls, bigger government, and therefore all the, if you will, all the recipe for the next crisis. So every crisis we learn the wrong things from it, which then generate the next crisis, which we learn the wrong things from it, which generate the next crisis. And government only grows in the process, it never shrinks. Even though the regulations are at fault, the regulations never go away, they just multiply. And this is the problem when you don't question the premises, when you don't question the foundations, when you don't question the whole system, rather than you try to tinker, you try to make small changes. You have to challenge the whole notion of the mixed economy. The mixed economy is a disaster. Now we know that if we take statism to its max, we know exactly what the result is. Poles, a little older than you guys, experienced it not that long ago. We know that if we move towards greater capitalism, what will happen? Well, in the few periods of history where we've tried it, and in the few places in history where we've tried it, at least close to it, we get dramatic increases in wealth, dramatic increases in the well-being of poor people, dramatic increases in life expectancy, dramatic increases in technology. Everything becomes better. So the one option generates much better results. The other option is an unmitigated disaster that nobody wants to go back to. And yet we're stuck in the middle, drifting towards the disaster. And one has to ask, why? What is it that's so bad about capitalism that we refuse to move in that direction? And that, to me, is the real interesting question. Because every time and every place where more capitalism is tried, where greater reliance on free markets and on private property rights is tried, it's an enormous success if you want people's well-being to be improved, if you want the poor to be richer, and if you want wealth creation. There's something in the human experience, in human ideology, in human philosophy today that is antagonistic to the success of individual human beings. And that's what needs to be challenged.
With respect to the topic of corporations, which are allegedly too big to fail, isn't it that capitalism is being misunderstood with nowadays corporatism, or something which is called crony capitalism? Can we say that on a real free capitalist market there will be such a big corporations taking over more and more that will be so powerful that they are today like today's banks? And can we say that in a model laissez-faire economy there could occur such an event as the business cycle as an economic crisis from, for example, 2007 or 2001? Or if not, can we say that the role of the government here is once again a crucial role? So that can we say that the government should once again interfere in order to stop those companies grow so big? Or once again, shouldn't the government do anything at all here and let the people decide whether they want to support the company A or the company B? And if they are willing to do so, then we will have a natural monopoly, which is nothing evil per se. So how do you view this situation? How do you think that today's corporatism is to blame rather than the laissez-faire capitalism? And how do you think, where are the differences between those two models? And first of all, I would like you to answer from Dr.
So I don't like the term corporatism, and I certainly don't like the term crony capitalism. Both corporatism demeans corporations, and I'm a big fan of the corporate form. I know some of my libertarian friends are not, but I am. And I don't like the term crony capitalism, because all there is capitalism, and cronyism is a feature of statism. It's a feature of every form of statism. Statism depends on the bribes it gets from companies. I mean, in a system, laissez-faire capitalism, in which politics are separate from the economy, in which politicians have no control over the economy in the sense of regulations, in the sense of controls, and in the sense of taxes, then corporations have no incentive to come to politicians and bribe them, because politicians have no control over them. So why bribe somebody who has no control over you? Most cronyism is an act of self-defense. So my favorite example of this is Microsoft. In the early 1990s, Microsoft had no presence in Washington. $0 on lobbying, no staff in Washington. They did nothing. They said, leave us alone and we'll leave you alone. We'll run our business. And they were brought in front of the US Senate. And you know, they were yelled at by Republican congressmen saying, you've got to start lobbying, you've got to start bribing us. Right? And of course Microsoft said, no, we're not interested. So what happened? Well, a year afterwards, the Justice Department went after Microsoft on antitrust. And they almost destroyed the company. I mean, one could argue they did destroy the company. They certainly destroyed the spirit of innovation within Microsoft. Was destroyed by the antitrust case against it. So what did Microsoft